430 kilowatts of power, a 0 to 100k an hour sprint of 3.5 seconds, all-wheel drive with drift mode, seating for 5 in comfort, and a price tag that's going to be 6 figures once it's on the road. That sounds rather a lot like a BMW M5 or an AMG wagon. But a Kia? Well, things have changed since Kias of old, and their electric architecture is really pushing boundaries with its 800-volt architecture, allowing super fast charging, and the EV6 GT is the flagship of the range. It's set to launch here in Australia in 2023 in the first quarter of the year, and we're having a sneak preview of it right now. Now, you may have seen some other outlets have already driven this car on the road in other countries, but our EV6s are a little bit special, and that's because they've been blessed with an Australian ride and handling tuning program, and we're going to talk to the man behind that right now. So I'm here with Graeme Gambold, who was the chassis dynamicist on the EV6 and the EV6 GT. So Graeme, tell me how you solve the challenges of working with a 2-ton electric vehicle, making it handle and ride well.
Yeah, well, 2 tons is a lot of weight to control, and it's our objective as chassis dynamicists to make that indetectable to the driving experience, which we've achieved with this car. But it's all about sophisticated dampers and a chassis system that's got electronic computer control.
Interesting. And this is the first EGMP product to debut adaptive dampers, if I'm correct. Tell me the differences in tuning those versus the standard ride frequency selective dampers on the regular EV6.
Oh, it's really quite different. We started in Germany at the Nürburgring, 2 weeks of hydraulic damper tuning with the supplier Mando on country roads and on the racetrack. Got the car to the point where we were happy with the hydraulic tune, and then from there we go into electronic algorithm tuning. It also takes about 2 weeks of repetitious rough country roads.
Yeah. And that's all about the laptops. So you set a baseline and then it's all about tweaking with computer software.
Yeah, there's a very detailed computer program that we can put a different suspension code in for each of the modes, so normal, sport and GT, and they vary quite a lot, and we can control all aspects of the body motion on top of the primary damper tune.
And obviously Kia spent a lot of money developing the EV6 GT to start with, so why does it need to change for Australia?
Our road conditions are quite different on the global measure, so we spend a lot of time having to tailor the suspension tune and the vehicle dynamics to be suitable for Australian road conditions, which was a big challenge for this. Because of COVID, we had to travel to Germany to do the hydraulic damper tune because we couldn't bring engineers here, so we had to then try and find rough Australian type roads in smooth Germany, which we managed to find, some old farm tracks, but it's the road conditions.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that. Such a different condition to other places in the world. So hopefully we'll be able to test that very soon. I look forward to doing so, but let's get back into some extra details about the EV6 GT. At the rear, the changes are very small. It's very subtle when compared to the regular EV6 with only a change in the rear diffuser. Down here though, you can tell it's an EV6 GT by its 21-inch alloy wheels wrapped in specific Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres measuring 255mm wide in 40 series. There's also an electronically controlled mechanical limited slip differential for the drift mode inside that I'll talk about in a minute. Coming around to the front, we've got a square setup, so there shouldn't be too much understeer in this car. The front geometry is also changed a little bit, but the changes are significant compared to the regular EV6 GT. It runs slightly different suspension kinematics and other nerdy things that we'll talk about when we get to drive this car. And finally, around the front, we've got this gorgeous fascia, LED headlights, and a slight change to the front air dam, which isn't really an air dam because it's not for air, with vertical strikes instead of horizontal strikes that you see in the regular Kia EV6 GT line and Air range. As for motors, I touched on the total outputs at the top, but this vehicle is slightly rear biased with a 270 kilowatt motor at the back and a 160 kilowatt motor at the front for 80% more power than a standard EV6. That number is frankly quite astonishing when you say it out loud, and it means this car will get to 100 k's an hour in about 3.5 seconds. There's also 740 newton meters of torque on tap. This thing is going to be an absolute rocket ship out on the road, and I can't wait to drive it. Thanks to that fantastic eGMP architecture with its 800 volt electrics, this thing can get juiced from 10 to 80% in about 18 minutes or 8 hours on an 11 kilowatt AC charging station. The EV6 GT uses exactly the same 74 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery as a regular EV6, but its bigger wheels and tyres and more powerful motors means its electricity consumption climbs to 22.7 kilowatt-hours per 100 Ks for a 424 kilometre WLTP driving range. Straight into the EV6 GT's cabin, and it feels very familiar if you've spent any time in any of the other EV6 variants sold here in Australia, but with a couple of key differences that do go a long way. Starting with these seats. Now, at over 100 grand by the time you've got it on the road, you may be expecting electrically adjustable seats. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Instead, they're a suede cloth appointed bucket seat. Now that was chosen for this car's sportier intention, and they're only manually adjustable, but sitting in them right now, just for a couple of minutes, I can already feel the bolsters hugging me in really nicely, and I reckon they're going to be absolutely sweet when you're out on the road or on the skid pan using this car's drift mode. That brings me on to the next interesting thing about the EV6 GT, and that is the drive modes and the ambient lighting. You've got your drive mode buttons on the steering wheel, just like you do in any other EV6. This one activates the normal drive modes. You've got Eco, Normal, and Sport. And as you can probably see, the ambient lighting is linked to the drive mode color, which is a really nice, cool little touch. And then we've got GT mode. Pressing that here unlocks the full 430 kilowatts of power on tap available to all four wheels. The other really cool thing about this EV6 GT is that, unlike a lot of EVs out there, you can fully disable the ESC and traction control systems. And then that's done. We hold the paddles behind the steering wheel, and then we're in drift mode. That drift mode's available as long as you've got over 70% charge in the battery, and it sends the power all the way to the rear axle. Although technically speaking, it's just the rear motor activating, but it should let you get some nice smoky drifts that we'll be sure to be testing next year when this car launches. The rest of the stuff, as I said at the top, is very familiar. You've got a 12.3-inch screen up here, which is crisp and responsive and has wired Apple CarPlay. You've got your clever little shortcut buttons down here that you can choose to use for shortcuts for the nav screen or for the HVAC controls. And then you've got plenty of practicalities here as well. 2 cup holders, really decent armrest, and this sort of floating center console here with plenty of places to plug in and charge your devices. And finally, we'll cover it because it's slightly different from the rest of the EV6 range. The GT still gets a power tailgate, but at 480 litres of storage space, it's 10 litres down on the rest of the EV6 range, but that's not really a big deal. Being the dual motor, the frunk is also only 20 litres, but it's a good spot to store your charging cables or odds and ends. So that's it, a quick preview of the Kia EV6 GT here in Australia that's due to launch in the first quarter of next year. It's the most expensive Kia ever, it's also the most powerful Kia ever, and I want to hear your thoughts on the EV6 GT. Will you be lining up to buy one of these high-performance Kias, or will you be looking at one of its rivals? Let me know in the comments section down below, and let us know what you want to see Wheels Media do with the Kia EV6 next year when it launches in Australia. Of course, we'll be doing 0 to 100 k an hour testing and testing that drift mode out, but which car should we throw it into a comparison with? Perhaps a BMW i4 M50 or even a Porsche Taycan. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.